Now that my basic modeling is done on the drone, it's time to make sure I have it in UE4. So I have this very kind of basic setup built in UE4, which is just a plane with an alpha on it, and then also an exponential height fog to kind of make the whole scene grey. So I just want to drop the drone in to UE4, and you'll notice that already I've kind of made no changes to the import settings, other than making sure it brings in my custom normals. So now all I'm doing is I'm creating a material, and this material is just going to have sort of basic functions right now. So I'm creating constants that will be used for the metallic information, roughness, and then also base color. And I'm also like right-clicking and converting to parameter so that when I create duplicates of this asset, of this material, then I can adjust those exposed parameters. So all I've done is I've made one for the body and one for the hardware, and then I can just go in and I'll say, okay, I want it to be this color, and then I want to maybe change the metalness and the roughness on those. So it's these very basic kind of starting off points like I've done in Modo. So now that I have it where I can come and look at it in UE4, then I'll start to use the preview rendering in Modo much less often because it's not going to be my final result. So now I can start to rely on what does my asset look like in UE4. But also the one great thing about how I was working in Modo is that I've been able to get the design all the way to this point without needing to get it into a game engine, because otherwise if I was moving back and forth constantly, then it would be a much slower process. So now what I'm doing is I'm setting up a new material, and I'm telling the material it's a deferred decal shader, and I'm bringing my decal sheet in, and I'm plugging it into color and alpha or opacity, and then I'll just need to take those materials and apply them to the correct material ID on the vehicle itself. So every so often I'll just drag one out and drop it onto the vehicle so you can see that the decal's working, and then once I know the decal's working, then I'll apply it to the vehicle properly. So then all I'll need to do is just kind of mess around to make sure I'm happy with the way the asset's looking in UE4, so I can just continue to work on my process as I start to increase the level of detail and increase the amount of decals. And just do it in exactly the same way I was using with the preview renderer, but now I'm using UE4. So I might still use a preview render every so often for sort of like decal ideas, but this is kind of the base of how I'm working. So you can now see that I've just done exactly the same process with the projected decal, except this one actually has a normal map on it. And now I just want to use this same default material just to create roughly what looks like a sort of a shiny lens material. And you'll notice at the moment I've done no kind of UVing at all on the vehicle. It's just the UVs don't matter because it's a flat surface. Also you'll notice that those boosters on the opposite side of the vehicle were inverted, like the normals were inverted, and that's because they are instances in Modo. So I'm exporting all of the instances, but instances that are scaled negatively in order to be on the other side of the vehicle have flipped normals. So I kind of knew that was a problem from the start, but it's not a huge issue because I just make sure I'm looking from this one side of the vehicle, and then at the end when I'm happy, then I'll collapse it down, because I can get an overview of the whole thing in Modo's renderer, and I can also get an overview of the whole thing from the main angle I'm thinking of in UE4. So that's kind of like the whole UE4 setup done. So now that I kind of have a more real-time feedback loop going, then I can start to think about how do I improve these decals and all of these different elements on the vehicle. So I'm thinking the big OTech Industries on the side I didn't really like, so I want to change it to Reaper so it feels a bit more ominous. And here I'm just refining the actual decal mesh for the Reaper logo and for some of these kind of like numbers on the sides, because I'm thinking that this can be Reaper 13 And then the M08172 can just be a serial number for the type of vehicle. And then 13 is the actual identifying number for this particular Reaper drone. And then I just thought Reaper on the side of the vehicle would be much cooler and a bit more evil than just having OTech Industries. And you can tell that the company hasn't made an effort to give it a nice, cute name. So that helps to give it the feeling that maybe this is a bit sort of shady and maybe you don't want to come across one. And also what I want to do is give it a cooler font. So I have kind of the same rule in my when I do any kind of font work, is that typically I'll always use one font. And then if I do want more fonts, then I'll only ever use 2, and I use my kind of normal ratio, which is kind of 30-70. So when you look at the decals, this one big decal is using this cool font, but this will be the only time. So 30% of kind of all the decal space you'll see, or maybe 20%, will be this cool font. And then the other 70 to 80% of all decals will all use this much more boring base font, because I don't want the fonts and typography and things like that to start taking over. And I'm also not good at typography, so I don't want to make it so complex that it makes the whole result ugly based on my lack of graphics design knowledge. So all I'm doing now is I'm refining the mesh slightly more. I know it's projected, so it's not a huge problem, but I also do want it to be quite accurate because I don't want it to project in a weird way. So now I'll just basically continue the process as I have been as I start to refine everything now that everything is set up in UE4. And here I'm just setting up roughness values so I can make them more closely match the vehicle or not. So after this, I'll continue on with refining my design.